My mother-in-law handed me a torn, moldy dress and called it tradition. When I refused, my fiancé said, "Get on your knees or get out." I chose to leave. Hours later, he called me trembling. The scissors were still on the floor of the storage room when the police arrived. I know because Detective Rhonda Calloway, 14 years with the Columbus PD, the kind of woman who writes everything down before she says anything out loud, told me later that the hotel's head of security had photographed them exactly where they fell, still open, blades apart, like whoever had set them down expected to come back. Kathleen hadn't even bothered to hide them. That's the part that stayed with me longest. Not the dress, not Larry's face, not the ring sitting on top of that ruined lace like a small, cold goodbye. The scissors, left on the floor like the whole thing was so beneath her that cleanup wasn't worth her time. Like I wasn't worth her time. Like I never had been. I should tell you who I was before that morning, because context matters and because I spent 7 years being slowly convinced that my version of events wasn't trustworthy. My name is Elizabeth Marsh. I'm 34 years old. I'm a licensed occupational therapist with a practice in the Short North neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio. I run a small clinic, 3 staff, mostly pediatric patients, kids who need someone to believe they're capable of more than the world expects from them. I am, by nature and by training, a patient person. I am also, by nature and by training, someone who notices things other people dismiss. I noticed things about Kathleen Hargrove for 6 of the 7 years I was with her son. I told myself they didn't mean what I thought they meant. I was very good at that. Larry and I met at a conference in Cincinnati. He was presenting on commercial property development. I was attending a continuing education panel on adaptive environments, and we ended up at the same hotel bar arguing pleasantly about whether open-plan offices were genuinely productive or just a way to make surveillance feel collaborative. He was funny. He was warm. He had this way of listening that made you feel like the most interesting person in the room. 6 months in, I met Kathleen. She hugged me at the door of her house in Dublin, a wide, white-columned house that Larry had grown up in, and that she maintained with the intensity of someone who had confused real estate with identity. She held both my hands. She looked at me the way someone looks at a problem they're already solving in their head. "Elizabeth," she said. "What a pretty name for such a plain girl." She said it like a compliment. Larry laughed it off. "That's just how she is," he said in the car on the way home. "She doesn't mean anything by it." I looked out the window. She meant something by it. He reached over and squeezed my hand. "She'll love you eventually. Just give her time." I gave her 6 years. She used every one of them. The escalation was so gradual, I want to draw you a graph. Year 1, small comments about my appearance. My hair, my clothes, the way I held my fork, delivered in front of Larry, who would smile and redirect the conversation. I told myself this was just her generation, just her personality, just a woman who expressed love through criticism. And wasn't that sad, really, more than anything? Year 2, the opinions about my career. She'd wanted Larry to marry someone in finance or law. A real profession, she said once, right in front of me. Not something you'd do for charity. I was in the middle of building my practice. I had 4 patients that year. I had 12 the next. I didn't explain myself to her. I learned not to. Year 3, the decisions she started making without asking. The holiday menu I'd offered to help plan, handed back to me with everything I'd suggested crossed out. The anniversary dinner reservation Larry and I had made, canceled and replaced with a family dinner at Kathleen's house, because it made more sense. The birthday gift I'd chosen for Larry, a weekend trip to a cabin in Hocking Hills, his idea of a perfect 2 days, quietly undermined when she booked a family trip the same weekend and acted surprised by the conflict. Year 4, the comments stopped being casual. She told Larry, at dinner with both families present, that she hoped I understood what I was getting into, that Larry had needs she'd spent years managing, that I should be realistic about whether I was equipped for that. I watched Larry's face across the table. He was looking at his plate. I excused myself and went to the bathroom and stood at the sink with the water running and counted backward from 20, which is what I teach my youngest patients to do when something feels too big. Year 5, I found the first text exchange. Larry had left his phone on the kitchen counter, screen up. It lit up with a message from Kathleen. I wasn't trying to read it. I wasn't snooping. But when a message says, "Has she brought up children yet? Tell me immediately." You tend to read the ones above it too. "Kathleen, you need to draw some boundaries with her. She's starting to settle in." Larry, "It's fine, Mom." Kathleen, "It's not fine. She's making decisions like this is her house." Larry, "I said I'll handle it." That phrase again. I put the phone face down, made dinner, didn't mention it. I was still at that point willing to tell myself there was another explanation. Year 6, the engagement. Larry proposed on a Tuesday evening. Unexpectedly, no grand gesture, just the 2 of us on the couch with takeout containers on the coffee table and the ring pulled from his jacket pocket. It was a beautiful ring. I said yes before I finished thinking. The next morning, Kathleen called me directly. First time she'd ever called me directly. "I want you to know," she said, "that I suggested a smaller ring." He insisted. Click. That was the whole call. I held the phone and thought, there she is. The whole architecture of it, right there in one sentence. She can't congratulate me without making sure I know she tried to give me less. But I was engaged. I was happy. I had a practice that was growing and a man I loved and a future I could see clearly. And I decided, one more time, the last time, that I could manage Kathleen. That love was bigger than this. That I was strong enough. I was strong enough. That part turned out to be true. Just not in the way I expected. The wedding was planned for a Saturday in October at the Meridian Hotel in downtown Columbus, a 4-star property party with marble floors and high ceilings and the kind of lighting that makes everyone look like they're in a film. We had 200 guests, a 7-piece band, a florist who'd spent 4 months on the centerpieces, a photographer named Danny Osei who'd shot 30 weddings and cried at all of them. The bridal suite was on the 4th floor. I arrived at 8 in the morning with my sister Janet, my 2 bridesmaids, and a garment bag containing the dress I'd spent 11 months choosing. Ivory silk, clean lines, exactly what I'd wanted since I was old enough to have an opinion about it. By 10, my hair was done. By 10:30, the makeup artist, a woman named Rosie, who played jazz through a Bluetooth speaker while she worked and called everyone gorgeous, had finished. I was standing at the mirror in the hotel robe, looking at myself, thinking about the strange, specific piece of a moment right before something big happens. The knock came at 10:47. I remember the time because Janet checked her watch. Kathleen walked in without waiting for an answer. She was dressed for the wedding already, a pale blue suit, pearls, the expression she wore when she was about to do something she'd been planning for a while and was very pleased about it. She was carrying a yellowed garment bag over one arm, long, lumpy. The zipper pull was tarnished. She set it on the bed. She smiled at me. "You'll wear this today," she said. "It's our tradition." The room went quiet in a specific way. The way rooms go quiet when everyone present understands that something is happening, but no one has decided yet whether to acknowledge it. I unzipped the bag. The smell hit me first. Mold. Old perfume gone rancid. Something underneath it I couldn't name. Sweet and rotting. The dress inside it wasn't a dress anymore. Not really. It was the shape of one. White, or it had been, now yellowed to the color of old newspaper. The left sleeve was torn from the shoulder seam, hanging by a few threads. The hem was black in places. Not dirt. Something older. Embedded. The bodice had a long tear down the right side, jagged, like something had caught it. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I looked at Kathleen. "What is this?" I said. "My mother's wedding dress," she said. "Every bride in this family wears it on her wedding day." I turned to look at Larry. He was standing near the window. He'd arrived with his mother. I registered that distantly, that he had come with her, not separately. And he was standing with his arms crossed, and his face had the expression it got when he'd already made a decision and was waiting for me to catch up to it. "Larry," I said. "What is this?" "It's tradition," he said. "Put it on." The room was completely still. Janet made a sound, small, involuntary, like something landing. "I'm not wearing that dress," I said, calm, factual, the way I talk to a child in my clinic who has just been told something unfair. "I hear you. Here is what's true." And Larry uncrossed his arms and said, "I will hear this sentence for the rest of my life. Get on your knees, apologize to my mother, and put on the dress." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't blink. He said it the way you say something you have been authorized to say. The ring on my left hand felt very heavy. I reached down and took it off. I set it on top of the garment bag, on top of that ruined, rotting dress, and I looked at it sitting there for 1 second. Then I picked up my bag, my personal bag, the one with my phone and my wallet and my keys, and I walked out. I made it to the elevator before Larry called. I watched his name light up on my phone, pressed the lobby button, watched the doors close. In the lobby, I sat in a chair near the entrance and answered his second call. His voice was shaking badly, not with grief, with something tighter. Panic. "Elizabeth, come back. Right now. The hotel manager, the police, my mother is saying you did something. What are you talking about? Security cameras." His voice dropped. "In the hallway outside your room." I stopped. Cameras. This was a 4-star hotel. Of course there were cameras. In the corridors, the stairwells, the service entrances. The kind of hotel that takes liability seriously has cameras everywhere and keeps the footage for 30 days. "What about them?" I said. "Just come back. We can fix this before it—" "Larry," my voice was very steady. I noticed that about myself. My hands were steady too. "What is on the cameras?" Silence. "Tell them the truth," I said. "Elizabeth, don't do this. Not are you okay. Not I'm sorry. Not even please come back. I love you." Just another instruction. Another management attempt. 7 years of that voice telling me what to do, wrapped up in a calm tone that was supposed to feel like reason and always felt like a ceiling. I hung up, called Janet, told her where I was, told her to come down when she could. Then I sat in the lobby of the Meridian Hotel in my ivory silk wedding dress, with my engagement ring in my bag and my hands very still in my lap, and waited. Janet arrived with Rosie, the makeup artist, who had apparently decided this was now her situation too and was not leaving. They came through the lobby like a small, determined convoy. Janet took one look at my face and said, "Tell me everything." I told her everything. While I talked, Janet called the hotel's guest services desk and asked to speak with the security manager. His name was Frank DeLuca, 22 years in hotel security, the kind of man who had seen every permutation of wedding drama and had stopped being surprised by any of it. He met us in a small office near the front desk. He was professional and careful, and he had already, he told us, been in contact with a responding officer. "The responding officer," he said, "is going to want to speak with you." "About what?" Janet asked. Frank DeLuca set his hands flat on the desk. "We have footage," he said, "of a woman in a gray blazer removing a garment bag from the corridor outside your suite at approximately 8:52 this morning. She entered a service storage room on the same floor. She was in there for 11 minutes. She exited without the garment bag and returned to the suite. Approximately 45 minutes later, she exited the suite carrying the garment bag, at which point the bag appeared to have different contents. The room was very quiet. "Do you know who that woman is?" he asked me. "Kathleen Hargrove," I said, "my fiancé's mother. Frank DeLuca nodded slowly. The scissors were still in the storage room when we checked. Detective Rhonda Calloway arrived at the hotel at 12:15 p.m. She had 14 years with Columbus PD, wore a gray blazer over a white shirt, and carried a legal pad she wrote on in very small, very neat handwriting. She introduced herself, shook my hand, looked at me with the direct, unhurried attention of someone who is trying to determine what kind of person they're dealing with before they say anything important. She was also visibly a woman who had heard a lot of stories. "Walk me through the morning," she said. I walked her through it. I was organized, specific. I gave her times, names, verbatim quotes where I could. She wrote it all down. She asked clarifying questions. She did not make sympathetic noises or tell me she believed me. She just wrote. When I finished, she looked up. "Do you have any documentation of prior behavior from Mrs. Hargrove? Anything in writing?" Janet, who had been sitting beside me, looked at me. "Show her," Janet said. I'd been carrying it since the lobby. Not intentionally. It had been on my phone all week, a thread I'd noticed and dismissed. Larry had forwarded it to me by accident the previous Monday, and at the time I'd assumed it was an error, a long family email chain about logistics that he'd meant to forward elsewhere. I'd started reading it properly in the lobby while I waited for Janet. The thread included messages between Larry and Kathleen from the night before the wedding. I handed Detective Calloway my phone. She read. She scrolled. She read again. "She's going to force the dress issue in the morning," Kathleen had written. "Larry, don't make a scene." Kathleen, "Then make Elizabeth behave." Larry, "If she starts drama, I'll handle it." Detective Calloway set the phone on the desk between us. "He knew," she said, not a question. "He knew," I said. She wrote something on her legal pad, circled it once. "I'm going to need you to forward me that thread," she said, "and I'm going to need a formal statement. Can you do that today?" "Yes," I said. "Good." She looked at me steadily. "Mrs. Hargrove is currently in conversation with my colleague upstairs. I want you to know that the hotel is pursuing this as a property damage matter. The dress in your suite, your dress, has been assessed. Repair may not be possible." Something moved through my chest. Not grief. Something more specific. The precise, sharp feeling of having your suspicion confirmed. The feeling of being right about something you desperately wanted to be wrong about. "I understand," I said. "Do you have an attorney?" "I will in an hour," I said. My college roommate Priya Anand is now a civil attorney specializing in family law and personal damages, operating out of a firm on Broad Street. She answered on the second ring. I hadn't spoken to her in 4 months. She listened to the whole story without interrupting and said, "When I finish, I need you to email me everything. Every text, every screenshot, the footage link if the hotel will give it to you, any documentation of prior incidents. I mean anything. Do you have anything in writing from previous years?" I thought. "Yes," I said, "because I do what I've always done. I keep records. Not because I'm suspicious by nature, but because I am a clinician. I document things. Patient notes, incident logs. In personal life, I'd kept a journal for 15 years, and in the last 4 years, the journal had included, matter-of-factly, incidents I'd labeled KH in the margins. Kathleen Hargrove, what she'd said, when, who was present. I had 4 years of margin notes. Priya inhaled. "Elizabeth," she said, "I want you to listen to me carefully. You are in a much stronger position than you realize right now. On property damage alone, your dress, the emotional distress, the financial loss of a canceled ceremony, we have a case. With the text chain showing premeditation and Larry's prior knowledge, we have a substantially stronger one. Against Larry, too?" A pause. "Did you want to go there?" I looked at the ceiling of Frank DeLuca's office. The fluorescent light above me hummed very faintly. Outside the door, the Meridian Hotel was presumably continuing its business. Other weddings, other receptions, other lives unfolding in marble-floored corridors. "I want to go wherever the truth goes," I said. "Then yes," Priya said. "Against Larry, too." At 4 p.m., I called the venue coordinator for the ballroom. Her name was Melissa Kwan, and she had the voice of someone who had been managing anxious people's worst days for a decade and had developed a particular combination of warmth and practicality to handle it. "The ceremony is canceled," I said. She paused. "Ms. Marsh, the reception deposit is non-refundable." "I know. Keep it." I took a breath. "But I want the ballroom tonight, under my name. The bar, the catering, the band, everything that was already booked. Just change the occasion." Silence. "Can you do that?" I asked. "What would you like it to say on the board?" she asked. Her voice was careful and warm. I thought for exactly 1 second. "Just put my name," I said. "Elizabeth Marsh. That's enough." At 7 p.m., I walked into that ballroom. I was wearing jeans and a black blouse I'd borrowed from Janet. My hair was still in the updo Rosie had done that morning. I was carrying nothing except my phone and the absolute knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The room stood up when I walked in. Not planned, not coordinated. People just rose, the way you do when something true enters a room. My father got to me first. He put both arms around me and didn't say anything. My father, a man of very few words, who communicates mostly in presence and proximity. And I pressed my face against his shoulder for a moment and felt the week catch up with me all at once, briefly and completely. My mother was crying. She's always crying. I love her for it. Janet handed me a glass of champagne as soon as I surfaced. She raised hers. "To not marrying a coward," she said. The room laughed. I laughed too. Real laughter. Loud and unguarded and completely free. The kind you only get when you've just set something very heavy down. The band played. The food was extraordinary. My friend Marco danced with 4 different women in sequence. The photographer Danny Osi, who'd come back unprompted because she said she didn't know what else to do with with a booked Saturday evening, took pictures all night that I have looked at many times since. Photographs of people being genuinely happy, which is rarer than wedding photos usually suggest. Larry called at 9:47 p.m. I stepped out to the corridor. He was crying. Ugly, open, gasping crying, the kind that only comes when you've spent a long time performing composure, and the performance has finally collapsed under the weight of consequences. Elizabeth, he said. My mother. She's been charged. Criminal mischief. Property damage. The hotel is pressing charges too. Everyone knows. Please, just tell them it was a misunderstanding, that you overreacted. I stood in the corridor of the Meridian Hotel in Janet's black blouse with the sound of the band coming through the door behind me. Overreacted, I said. Elizabeth, you told her to make me behave, Larry. My voice was quiet, precise. I have the text. Rhonda has the text. Priya has the text. The hotel has the footage. You knew what she was planning, and you stood in that room and told me to get on my knees. I paused. There's no misunderstanding. For the first time, everyone understands perfectly. I hung up, went back inside, danced with my father. That should have been where the story ended. Clean, just, complete. It wasn't. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday night, my phone rang at 2:14 a.m. Unknown number. Columbus area code. I almost let it go. My thumb hovered over the red button and something, I don't know what, something animal and awake in the part of the brain that recognizes danger before the rest of you does, stopped me. I answered. The voice was a woman's, low and careful, the way you speak when you're in a room you're not supposed to be in. She said, "Is this Elizabeth Marsh?" "Yes," I said. "My name is Claire," she said. "I was Larry Hargrove's fiancée before you." The apartment was very dark. I sat up and turned on the lamp. "I need you to listen to me," she said. "And then I need you to decide how far you want to take this. Because what happened to you at that hotel is the dress, the cameras, the whole performance, that wasn't the first time." My hand tightened on the phone. "She did it to me too," Claire said. 4 years ago. Different hotel, different dress, same scissors." The room felt very still. "Larry knew then too?" I asked. A pause, small and heavy. "Larry," she said, "was the one who suggested the scissors. I called Priya at 6 a.m. I told her about Claire." Priya was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I need her number. I need her documentation. And Elizabeth, I need you to understand that this changes the nature of the case significantly." "How significantly?" "A pattern," she said, "is not an accident. A pattern is a practice." Within the week, Priya had spoken with Claire Donovan, 37, an accountant who'd moved to Pittsburgh after what she described as the collapse of her engagement and who had spent 4 years trying to decide whether what had happened to her was real or whether she'd simply failed some test she hadn't known she was taking. She had documentation, photographs, a journal. She had, saved in a folder on her phone, a text from Larry Hargrove dated 4 years ago that read, "She needs to understand her place before the ceremony. Mom has an idea." Priya compiled everything into a single case file. Detective Calloway, when she received it, sat with it for a day. Then she called me. "The original charges against Kathleen Hargrove stand," she said. "But this, the pattern, the prior incident, the documentation of Larry's involvement, this goes to the DA's office. This is not a property damage case anymore." "What is it?" I asked. "This," said Detective Calloway, 14 years on the force, a woman who wrote everything down before she said anything, "is a conspiracy to commit harassment, possibly more, depending on what else comes out." The DA's office assigned the case to an assistant district attorney named Marcus Webb. He was 39, methodical, the kind of attorney who asks questions you don't see coming because he's already 3 steps ahead of where you think the conversation is going. He called Kathleen's past. He found Claire. He found, through Claire, 2 other women. One who'd broken off an engagement with Larry's older brother Daniel 7 years ago under similar circumstances. One who'd simply disappeared from the family's orbit with no explanation anyone could account for. The picture that emerged was not a quirky family tradition. It was a system, a deliberate, coordinated pattern of using ritual humiliation to establish dominance over women entering the Hargrove family, to test them, to break them early so that what remained was manageable, compliant, already beaten before the ceremony. Kathleen Hargrove was charged in November with criminal mischief, harassment, and, after Marcus Webb spent 6 weeks building the pattern case, conspiracy. Larry Hargrove was charged with criminal facilitation. The Meridian Hotel filed a separate civil suit for property damages and reputational harm. Priya filed on my behalf for intentional infliction of emotional distress, destruction of property, and loss of contracted wedding services. Claire Donovan's attorney filed in Pittsburgh. The cases were separate, but they told the same story, and stories have a way of getting louder when there are more voices telling them. I am writing this 14 months after the morning with the garment bag and the scissors and the ring. The criminal cases are still moving through the courts. These things take time, as Marcus Webb reminded me calmly every time I called. Larry entered a plea agreement in September. Kathleen's trial is scheduled for spring. The civil settlement came through in August. I am not allowed to discuss the specific number. I will tell you that it covered the dress, the deposits, 3 months of therapy with a psychologist named Dr. Ama Ose, who has 14 years of clinical experience and a very good bookshelf, and a down payment on an apartment with a kitchen I love and windows that face east and catch the light every morning in a way that still, every single time, makes me feel like something. Claire and I talk on the phone occasionally. She is steady and dry-humored and tells it like it is, and I like her enormously. We have never met in person. We probably will eventually. My Practice has 12 patients now. One of them is a 7-year-old boy who spent a year being told he couldn't do things, and who last month tied his own shoes for the first time and looked up at me with an expression of such complete astonishment that I had to look away for a second to get myself together. That's the part they don't put in the viral story. The part after. The slow, ordinary, genuinely good work of building something that belongs entirely to you. I kept the ring, not because I wanted it, because Priya said it was mine legally, a conditional gift that had met its condition, and because letting Kathleen Hargrove have it, even symbolically, felt like one concession too many. It's in a box in my closet now. I don't look at it, but I know it's there. What I look at is the east-facing windows. Every morning, light coming in, mine, all of it. Finally, entirely mine.